Hello and welcome to All Villa, No Filler, a podcast all about Aston Villa, the world's greatest football team. Villa bounced back from an opening day horror show to demolish Everton 4-0. George is in such shock at such a great result that he's taken a leave of absence this week. And so I'm joined today by season ticket holder Richard Stevens. Rich, how are you doing?
Hi, Fran. Thanks very much. Great to be on. You've given me the big billing there as season ticket holder, a season ticket holder who didn't make it to the first game of the season. So look at me, what a very super fan I am. But yeah, I'm doing very well. It was excellent. I was traveling back from my holidays yesterday, but I was delighted. Partway through changing flights to see the live ticker of as Villa stretched the lead to four. So that really cheered me up, despite a fairly boring day of traveling. So all good.
Yeah, well, so I mean, I was at the game myself, but first I'll ask you this, Aston Villa, first day of the season, we got absolutely battered at St James's Park 5-1. I still think it was a bit of a freakish result, despite how bad it looked. But at the same time, to bounce back the next week, 4-0 at home, so convincingly against Everton. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this the week building up to the Everton game, and it's a little bit too easy, I think, to say, "Oh, it was a freak result." These things happen. We're still really good. Yeah, they do happen, but they don't really happen to really good teams. Yeah,
Mm,
it's not like every season Man City are losing 5-1. Before anyone jumps on me, I'm not comparing us to Man City, but the point is that Newcastle are, supposed to be one of the teams that we're in and around, to use that expression, and we did
mm,
get absolutely hammered. Having said that, it was a strange game. It was very Villa in the sense that the momentum just got completely out of hand, and we were unlucky with Mings. And I think that sort of really shook everyone that
mm.
it was another knee injury, and Tyrone Mings was clearly in a lot of pain. But I think sometimes we forget that they're not necessarily all mates, but they're colleagues at least,
Yeah,
and they see each other every day. And imagine if one of us was in the office or at work and someone was writhing around in agony. You wouldn't be able to just get over that. And I'm just joining the next Zoom call. See you later. It's just not how life is.
mm,
You would be thrown by it, and that's, I think there was an element of that too. So yeah, long ends. In summary, what I'm trying to say is a little bit too easy, I think, to just dismiss it completely as an anomalous result. But there was an element of it being just a very strange day. But it was massively important that we came back. And I mean, I like Everton as a team and as a
mm.
club, and I think they stand for lots of good things about football. They're not just some sort of money team. There's lots of problems, and this isn't for me to talk about Everton, but they're perfect for us to play against. Yeah, our record against them is excellent. We especially since we've come back to the top division, I think we've played them, is it 6 times? We've won five and drawn one, or something like that. Something that
Mm.
just meant that we really needed to have a team like them coming to play against us, and luckily to be comfortably ahead very quickly, it did make a big difference. So fingers crossed. I mean, this could all unravel at Hibs on Thursday evening, but I don't think it will. I think had we only, say,
Mm.
drawn with Everton or lost to Everton, Thursday night could be really awkward. It still could be, but I think it was just a really solid performance from what I've seen, what I've
Mm.
read, what people have talked about. But hopefully, it gets us back on track.
Yeah, it was a brilliant performance from Villa. I do think there's the caveat that Everton were absolutely abysmal. I'm
Yeah.
not kidding when I say I think that's one of the worst displays I've seen in a long time from another team. But by the same token, I do think Everton turning up and being very physical, defensive, that's the kind of team that the old Villa would have had problems against, and we would have lost 1-0 really frustratingly and not got the job done. Whereas this Villa, it just feels like we're so comfortable on the ball, we're so well coached that a team comes and tries to do that to Villa and tries to play the long ball or whatever at Villa Park, and it doesn't really pay off anymore. It's like we will just outplay you and we will just find a way to score. And I think there was a few different things that really stuck out to me. Like one, John McGinn, bloody hell, mate, 10 out of 10. I mean, he looked like a player who could be a talismanic leader at an absolute top of the range, Premier League winning team. That was the level he was playing at yesterday. And to be honest, it's reflective of kind of how he's played under Unai Emery for long spells. I think his
Mm.
his improvement as well as Tyrone Mings is just off the scale. And against Everton, it was like every pass he made was the right pass. Every time he got the ball and moved away from their defender, using his body in the perfect way, in conducting where other players should be going. And I think what happened a lot of the time was that Everton would press us because they thought, Villa likes to play it around at the back. And on a couple of occasions, they actually did it quite well. But then what it was doing was it was leaving space between the defence and the midfield for Diaby and McGinn. And also, I think Douglas Luiz and Carlos were getting more space than Everton would have wanted as well. And so the ball was coming into McGinn a lot and Diaby, and the two of them were just such a handful, particularly McGinn. Diaby looks like a real class player. He really does. But I think he also learned maybe a bit about the Premier League. Like every time he got the ball, he was getting kicked. It really was like that. And but his link up with Bailey was very, very good. Now Bailey, again, first 15 minutes, very frustrating, but he got that assist. Then he got a goal, and you're like, well, this is Bailey. Like, every now and again he does this, as frustrating as he is as a player. But, what do you say about Bailey, considering that, he's had such an impact on the game? Like, do you think we can ever find the consistency in him?
I don't think we can. I think we have to stop searching for that, because if he was consistent, he would be able to play at an extremely high level club. But the fact that he is inconsistent means that he's ended up at our sort of level. I'm not trying to denigrate Villa or be negative, but what he's capable of and the speed at which he moves, and the threat he has when he cuts inside or when he goes to the byline like he did yesterday. These are great assets that people pay an absolute fortune for. But I suppose I do find it frustrating, and it's not personal at all. It's just because I think it's more that we all know the potential he does have. But when he's not doing that, you think, oh, come on, Leon. That was just ridiculous. What are you doing? But then he'll go and do something brilliant, or he'll do something really clinical, like the goal he scored against Man City, or where he just does things that looks really natural and clean. So I think, in answer to your question, I don't think he's ever going to be super consistent. I think we have to accept that. If we want to, you're just going to lose your mind if you're expecting him to be doing exactly the same thing every week. And I suppose you could say a bit of a cliched thing, but also makes him dangerous, is that no one quite knows what he's going to be like that time. But I think what you said about Diaby is right. Dare I say it, he looks a bit more like a more consistent Bailey in some ways. He's got many of the elements to his game that Bailey has, in terms of he looks unbelievably rapid and athletic, and he's able to finish. It seems perhaps different to Bailey. I wasn't expecting this at all, but his right foot has been like the way he took the goal against Newcastle and that volley yesterday. Those were great efforts. He seems very both-sided, if you know what I mean, rather than constantly looking to go in one direction. So let's see. But first impressions of Diaby has been brilliant. This is normally now the cue for him to get a season-ending injury, and we'll never know. We'll never know what could have been since Luke Nillis, or you just fear when players come in have this really positive initial impact. I really hope he, fingers crossed, of course, he doesn't have anything like that. But really promising. And I think what you said about McGinn as well. I mean, I don't know. I've always thought, maybe this is, and we've talked about this privately. You always think with John McGinn, is this the time maybe he's reached his ceiling? That's it. What an unbelievable effort. He's come in and he's transformed himself. And then he goes away, gets back into the team, and he's better again. So I have nothing but admiration for him. That he's so, you could not imagine, I think, that how he lost completely his confidence with Gerrard, and then he was struggling to get in the team with Emery. And in the space of 6 months, he's the main man, and I've just got absolutely loads of time for him. He's finding himself playing further forward, which I think is interesting and is difficult for teams to deal with because of his, let's say, unusual physical characteristics. He's just really hard to get off the ball, and that makes such a big difference when he's able to hold up the ball towards the top of the pitch and then start finding players. And everyone knows how fit he is and how far he can run. And that combination of a bit of confidence, clearly being coached brilliantly by Emery, having a slightly new position, but doing some of the stuff he always used to do really well, it's sort of a perfect cocktail at the moment.
I've always thought he's a Manchester United player. I mean, as in like the traditional sense of Alex Ferguson. I'm convinced if Ferguson was sort of in his prime now as a manager, McGinn is the exact kind of like hard-working but real quality player that he would like. He just reminds me of an old-school United player, I think. And
Yeah.
yeah, at times he's sort of fallen out of form, but a lot of the time it's because he's been playing out of position. I mean, has to do things that aren't really bringing out the best in him. But now he's got a coach who really realises where he has to be on the pitch. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, his form's just gone through the roof, really. And as I say, against Everton, he was just an absolute 10 out of 10 player. And the combinations between him and Diaby were nice. And I think Diaby looks like a player who's a difference maker. I think that other teams are going to really fear and want to take out the game. His speed of thought is really quick. He's really, really rapid at like how he can think on his feet and can, see the game around him. Like really just just a high quality, intelligent sort of Champions League level player, I think. And as you say, more consistent than Bailey. And that's what everyone I interviewed about him said the same thing as well. But also another player stood out. Luca Dean did very well on the left. But Pau Torres, coming in, stepping in where Tyrone Mings is. It's so gutting to lose Tyrone Mings because he's such a talismanic player again for us. But, how do you feel about Pau Torres, from what you've seen of him so far?
I think he looks very composed, and he looks to be a good signing in the sense that he's certainly not overawed by coming to play in the Premier League. He's come with a big billing and he's not sort of folding. The only thing that does worry me a little bit is he seems to be, and I'm hardly, the most athletic person in the world, but he doesn't seem particularly quick and he does seem to be a little bit slow on the turn sometimes. I think in the Premier League, of all the things that can be exposed, it's that if you're not careful, pretty much every team is lightning. And if teams do start to work out that they can get in behind you, then your life can become a bit of a pain. I'm sure you can't add pace, that's not the point, but I'm sure he'll work out his position or what he needs to do positionally, how he can be blocking these runs at source and all this sort of stuff that the defensive coaches will work with him on. But that's the only thing that maybe I thought, wow, okay, this is something he needs to look at. But let's face it, that many defenders, almost just to sort of add on to what I was saying, that many defenders struggle with the pace of play. It's just relentless sometimes. But let's see. I mean, what do you think of him? You've obviously watched him in person yesterday, so you got a different sense of him. What did you think?
Yeah, when I saw him in pre-season, the thing I really noticed about him is that he looked like a CDM, and this is kind of what I thought of him when I saw him at Villarreal. A CDM in the sense of like a player who could play in midfield just because of his sort of, he's not as you say, not the quickest, but his ability to just retain the ball and pick a pass is, it's almost kind of classic Spain player, isn't it? Really, just great on the ball and the sort of player that Spain tends to produce. And I think that, but what I noticed about him yesterday was, he had a nice partnership with Conser. It was good for them to sort of start off with a clean sheet like that, because particularly with Mings out, there's a lot of question marks over whether Villa can ever perform up to standard without Mings. But I think Torres, what I really noticed he did was on the ball, he was so, composed again, but the way he can pick out a pass, and he has this very specific type of pass, which is kind of like a whipped, curved, left-footed ball, which goes straight into the feet. He sort of bypasses the midfield and goes straight into the feet of a McGinn, Watkins, or Diaby. And I think that there was a couple of occasions yesterday where that ball almost came off, and then a couple of occasions it went straight into the feet. But I think that as those players get to know each other better, that'll be a real strong asset and a really, getting the ball from back to front very rapidly. I think Pau Torres will be a big part of that because, you have to assume he's going to play a lot now this season now that Mings is out. And so I think it was a really, really, it was impressive display kind of on the ball and what he can offer as an attacking team. I think I'm interested to see what happens when we play a team that can attack better than Everton. Danjuma came on for Calvert-Lewin and quicker in behind, and there were one or two occasions in the first half, I saw him get in behind, and I thought, okay, that'll be interesting to see when better teams try and do that against us. But for now, you can't really argue with just how well all of them performed really yesterday.
Yeah.
It was a great way to come back from what was a pretty borderline, close to traumatic loss at Newcastle.
I mean, talk about on that. I mean, just talk about taking the wind out of your sails. It was like I've been so looking forward. We should have talked about this earlier, but we're here now. I'm so looking forward to the season. Normally, at the end of the football season, it's been such a sort of traumatic end. May April or in the COVID years, June and July, that you think, oh, thank goodness we don't have to suffer through this anymore. But this year I was genuinely excited, and then it was even stupidly thought we might win at Newcastle in a sort of way that we show everyone how we're even better than the pundits were giving us credit for, and then we just got hammered anyway. Sorry, mate.
No,
I think that was me. That's like a cathartic experience just to get that out. My poor wife, it doesn't care when I come out with this sort of rambling stuff, so I have to speak to someone.
yeah, it is true, isn't it? As Villa fans, I think we've just been so conditioned to fear the worst for so long that now when things are good, you're like, surely, it can't, we can't have the bad again now, please. But also, Yonderan got his first goal, which is great to see. Were you there when Juan Pablo Angel, another Colombian striker, got his first goal for Aston Villa against Coventry?
I was. I do remember that. I mean, they're totally different, aren't they, in terms of players? But John Duran seems to me an absolute wild card signing. He could be going back to the MLS next year, or he could just be this monster that we found, or anywhere in between. I think I get the impression he's very raw, and I think, what did they say yesterday? He's played something like 120 minutes in total.
I was really shocked when I heard that.
Yeah. So that was, he's obviously not had much of a chance. Physically, a monster. I mean, just strong, rapid, everything you'd want. Particularly, probably in a striker in the system where we play. Where he's going to be doing a lot of what Ollie Watkins is really good at. That holding up play, getting the ball, being strong, keeping defenders away from him, just being that avenue sometimes. So he looks like he could do all that stuff. Hopefully with a goal, it gives him a bit of confidence. When I watched the highlights, I thought, oh my God, he's that miscontrolled it. But I think that maybe that sums up John Duran. It's like you saw in that 1.5 seconds or whatever it is, both sides of him, a sort of miscontrol of a basic ball, but then a really composed finish, and he put it in as if he meant to do that, to bring Pickford to that side of the box so he could put it across. And who knows? But he clearly didn't mean to do that. But I think it's great. I mean, it's one of those things where yesterday was where everything went exactly as we wanted. A guy comes on 45 seconds into his game, he scored his first goal at Villa Park in a 4-0 win, and you just got to enjoy those ones and see what happens. I mean, you saw him in person yesterday, and you've seen him a bit in other games. What do you think of him?
Yeah, I think that from what I've seen of him so far, exactly as you say, he's a very raw talent, isn't he? And he's, I interviewed somebody earlier this year who was a scout in Colombia, and watched him a lot coming through, and he said him and Juan Pablo Angel's son were the two top talents to come out of Colombia for their age bracket, really. And he said he thought Yonderan was ahead. Now, from what I've seen of him so far in the Premier League, I think there's actually been glimpses of like, oh wow, okay, there's something there. Wow.
Where was it? He hit the bar, wasn't it? That was unbelievable.
Against City.
Yeah, that was, wow, what the hell was that?
Yeah, if that had gone in, I think we'd all remember that goal forever, wouldn't we? It was just an outrageous effort out of nothing. But just kind of a few times where it's like, okay, he's capable of that, but is it the simple things where you think, does he need a loan to learn the simple things? But, I think, it looks like Cameron Archer might be heading off, which is a bit of a shame, I think. But, we're going to need a striker as backup, really. And Yonderan, to get that goal and therefore to sort of get the belief in himself that, like, I actually do belong here because I can score goals in the Premier League. I've shown it to myself. And like what I did notice as well was, he looked very confident when the ball came into him. And Everton, they're probably physically the toughest defense you might even play against. If you're playing a ball, a long ball, and Watkins had a bit of a tough
James
time
Tarkowski is no joke. I wouldn't fancy that very much.
No, Tarkowski, Michael Keane, all of them, and Yonderan stood up to it, and he really did, and he held them off. And there were a couple of occasions he made a couple of really nice, clever passes, like. I think he looks like. I think, as you say, it's like now he's got his goal. You sort of think, right, okay, what happens now? I think that's the thing that's quite exciting. I think he'll get a few more goals this season. I think he. It's fun to think we've got a young player who could be something really, really good.
Yeah.
let's wait and find out, I guess. The temptation is to hype him up, and I will hype him up. That's
Yeah,
what I'm going to do here.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so just a great way to fight back. And also, one thing I have to mention, I noticed, it was the warm up, and I think I messaged you about this.
Yeah, yeah.
The pre-game warm-up, I think, summed up how the game went. So basically, Villa had their first out the 10 players who were outfield were all in kind of a 5v5 small-sided possession game. And it was like if one team lost the ball, then they became the defensive unit. And firstly, when you watch those Premier League players doing it, you're like, how does anyone tackle a Premier League player? How is it actually possible? Because
Yeah.
they just cannot lose the ball. So it was quite competitive, and you could see them all barging into each other, going in hard for challenges. And it sort of looked like I was like, right, they're going to be pretty set when they get into this game, ready to go straight away. But I watched Everton, and all Everton did with their defenders was they had all four of them lined up, and they had a coach on the halfway line booting it long, and it was just James Tarkowski heading it away over and over and over again, and the players just passing it back and forth. And I thought it looked so kind of rudimentary and unimaginative. And that's, I'm not saying that that's what Sean Dyche is. I think Sean Dyche is a really talented manager, but I'm just saying that watching it, it kind of felt to me like it reflected how the game went itself. I thought Everton looked incredibly unimaginative and incapable of reacting to what was happening in the game. Like corners constantly, you get Luca Dean and Douglas Luiz standing next to each other, and the idea was obviously they were like, well, we're not going to cross it in the area because Everton will just head it away every time. But what they would do is short corner, and John McGinn was always stood on the edge of the area, and it always went to him, and Everton never reacted. It was like they couldn't. It was like they weren't able to, react within the game. They had to sort of be told what to do rather than to just instinctively be like, someone has to go out there and stop this guy. So I just thought that was an interesting observation. And I think, if Everton are going to continue to play like that, they've lost already 1-0 at home to Fulham. Yeah, God, they're in trouble this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the only thing I can think of is maybe that Sean Dyche is embracing the sort of under 13 boys league football mentality. Is if you look really scary in the warm up, you're already sort of 2-0 up before kickoff. I can certainly say it used to work on me.
Yeah,
The sight of towering centre backs in men's bodies, aged 14, was certainly enough to put me off. It's good to know that for the professional players at the Villa, that's nowhere near enough. Interesting. Did Everton spend most of the warm up practicing their penalties? That would be the other classic boys football.
All of them going top corner.
Yeah, it was sort of like, guys, no one's going to take a penalty in this game, but we've all practiced them, which is great.
Yeah. Rich and I have known each other for many, many years, but we could be sitting at opposite ends of Villa Park if things get out of hand here on the spicy question. And today, Rich, I'm asking you, how do you feel about Villa potentially selling youth prospects like Jadon Philogene-Bidace and Cameron Archer?
Oh, that is a zinger. I would say instinctively a bit disappointed and feeling that they perhaps really haven't been given a fair chance to show that they can do it. Having said that, and as we constantly say somewhat predictably when we talk, you also have to trust that the team who have looked at these players know what they're doing, as in, Emery, his team of coaches, trainers, and of course, the director of football, etc. This won't just be a knee-jerk reaction saying, all right, we could make 12 million or whatever it will be for Cameron Archer and the same for the day. So I think it's one of those where I just have to sort of bite my lip a little bit and say, all right, then, if we think this is going to be beneficial in the long run, go for it. But it doesn't warm my heart to see players who've come through the academy system be sold despite, having shown some potential without really, it feels like, being given a chance to demonstrate it. I suppose you could counter that by saying, well, they have had, particularly Cameron Archer has been on the pitch. He is yet to score in the Premier League, and it's not a charity where we're giving local players the opportunity to until they do score. But that also seems a bit harsh. Like he barely seems to have been given very much of a go. He did very well in the Championship. Very well, maybe overstating. He had spells where he looked really good in the Championship, then maybe a little bit quieter. but it did feel that he earned a little bit of a go. But I suppose you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Well, with both of them, they both might be saying, look, the Villa may have said to them, we want you to stay, but you'll be squad players and you might barely get a go. And they've said, no, we want to go and get some football somewhere else. So you don't really know. But just to sort of to summarize what I just said in that ramble would be instinctively disappointed, but based on what we've seen over the last 9 months, willing to bite my lip and say, okay, let's hope this is the right call.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair way of putting it. And I think I sort of instinctively think Jadon Philogene, I thought he should stick around till January. I think, he's been linked now with Hull for £5 million. And by all accounts, Emery actually does want him to stay around, even though, he likely won't play loads. But I still think he'd play a fair bit. I still think he'd get opportunities if he stuck around and enough time to show what he can do. And I just think stick around till January. And if you're not getting the time by then you can, fair enough, head off. But I think, I mean, I'll always wish every Villa youth player well, really. Anyone who comes through the academy, you want them to do well. And Archer's another one. I think, I do instinctively feel he scored goals in the Premier League. It's hard to predict how many goals he'd score or what player he could become. But I do just think he would score. He scores too regularly, really, in the Championship and for England under 21s to say that he wouldn't do it in the Premier League. And that's not to say go 20 goals a season, but who knows? Maybe he could push towards 10, 11. He just seems a very natural goal scorer. But Aaron Ramsey, another one who looks like he's on his way to Burnley. But at the same time, elite clubs like Man City, they do tend to sell a lot of their youth players, for £15 million, that sort of fee, buyback clauses. They don't always enact it, but at least it's there as an option. So, it makes sense, I guess, with FFP as well. Pure profit. That's one of the crucial things, isn't it? Because Villa have not been selling players well for a few years. Grealish and Chukwuemeka maybe, and that's about it.
Yeah. I mean, I still wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of other players. I know we've got very little time, but there were, Digne being rumoured to leave. I think that could be something that happens, but let's see. But I'm with you. I think, and that's when I guess that's the sort of slightly unsavoury side to football is that, if you are an academy player, it's almost flipped it on its head. In the old days, they'd probably be the ones who were given a bit more leeway, a bit, one more chance to see if they can make it. Whereas these days, it really pays to be selling academy players, as you said, because you're not trying to net off any transfer fee or anything like that. It's just you're almost incentivized to be selling academy players. This isn't meant to be a rant about the FFP system, but it does seem a little bit counterintuitive that it's, you get more benefit from selling young players than you do from players who are running down their contracts.
Yeah, for sure. And there's not long left in the transfer window, but it looks like there's still going to be some movement at least. Where do you think Villa still needs to improve in the squad or find more depth? Do you think?
The only area I think I would say, and this is when the Arch thing is a bit odd, is you'd say up front. I mean, you think Ollie's yet to score this season. We're 2 games in. I mean, come on. He looked quite sharp in pre-season, but you can't help but think if Ollie is injured, what happens? We've already talked about John Duran potentially being one thing, but he could equally be something completely else. So we'd then be pretty thin up front. So that's the only area I would say. I think our midfield now, if you look at the depth we have there, no issues. I think if you look at at the back, even I think this sums up how far we've gone at, how far we've come rather is. Even though we lose Tyrone Mings in the first half of whatever it was, the first game of the season, it's not like we're now shot to pieces at the back. We've had to make some changes, but we've still got a pretty decent looking on paper defensive line. So I don't see any need there. It would be up front. I think we talked about this before. I'm naturally conservative when it comes to transfer market spending. I think it's just years of having been burned by it, which makes me always think let's stick with what we've got. But if there was someone to come in and we'd make a signing up front, but who do we sign? Like it's the easiest thing to just casually throw out. We need some reinforcements up front. Who are we going to sign that ticks that box, that is a proven Premier League goal scorer who's willing to come to the Villa and be a backup to Ollie Watkins. It's just not going to happen. So I think it's the sort of perennial problem for the teams at our level. It's only a very small number of teams. Your Man Cities, can have Haaland and Alvarez as their, you get my point. We don't have the luxury to be able to do that sort of thing. So let's see. And what about you, mate? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's generally been a really good transfer window. I think Pau Torres is he's a Spanish international, Europa League winner, knows Emery very well from their time at Villarreal. Moussa Diaby looks like a real class act, really quality player already. You can just sometimes you just see it, don't you? Very quickly. And he looks like with a bit of a coup there for Villa, I would say, with him, and hopefully his sort of good looking form so far continues. Otherwise, kind of forget who else we've signed this summer. Tielemans again, great depth for Douglas Luiz. Yesterday, we've got Europe. There's quite a few games coming up in the next few weeks. And Douglas Luiz coming off in the 60th minute for Tielemans. Perfect. I mean, that's exactly what you want, isn't it? So that's three really, really good signings, I think. And there's all these links to sort of Marcos Acuna. But when you think about it, we've got Jacob Ramsey to come back, Alex Moreno to come back. So they'll be back in the near future. And suddenly the squad looks a lot stronger. But like with you, I think Ollie Watkins stayed down for 30, 40 seconds yesterday after a collision, I think, with Pickford. And I had my heart in my mouth. And, there were gasps around me because everybody, I think, was thinking, oh, God. Because I think, as you say, if there's one player we're really struggling without, I think it's Ollie Watkins. That just looks like the one position that we really can't replace at the moment. And I'd say Emi Martinez as well in goal. I think it's very difficult to be a backup for what could arguably be the best goalkeeper in the world. But Robin Olsen, just doesn't give me the faith really that he can really play the sort of Emery style, playing it around at the back, that sort of thing. So I think goalkeeping up front. I'd love to see another right back, but I doubt that's going to happen. But you never know. Never know what's going to happen the next 2 days. But they're the main position I think that we could ideally strengthen.